What's up, friend? I found you something incredible. Before we start, smash that like button and help us hit 5,000 likes. Drop a comment below, and if you're new, click subscribe for all our fresh uploads. Alright, let's dive into this epic story. In 1956 Chicago, elderly Leonard Burling ran a modest tailor shop. Originally from Britain, he'd worked at a prestigious London fashion house before relocating to America and opening his own business. He hired young Mabel Shawn as his assistant. Leonard taught that measurement came first, understanding the client before cutting fabric. He studied customers closely, noting how they carried themselves and what they tried to conceal. His shop became renowned for quality, attracting wealthy families, including the powerful Boyle mafia family. The Boyles visited regularly, ordering suits and collecting messages from a mailbox Leonard had placed in the shop. One evening, Roy Boyle's son Richie arrived with his associate Francis to retrieve letters. While sorting through them, Francis discovered a message from a criminal organization called the Outwit. They asked Leonard to step out while they discussed it privately. In the lobby, Leonard noticed Mabel examining a London snow globe, a gift from someone she knew. She collected globes from cities worldwide because she dreamed of traveling beyond Chicago. She wondered why Leonard, who could live anywhere, had chosen this city. After Richie and Francis left, Leonard mentioned that the clock shop owner next door wanted to meet Mabel. She showed no interest. She was involved with someone else. Leonard realized she developed feelings for Richie, recognizing the subtle signs of flirtation between them. He warned her the Boyles were violent and dangerous. Mabel said she'd spent her life around men like Richie and knew how to handle them by looking them in the eye and pretending to be one of them. She told Leonard she wouldn't become like him and planned to leave someday. Leonard said she was free to be herself, then pointed out she was folding garments incorrectly. After closing, Mabel left while Leonard worked late. He fell asleep at his desk and dreamed of fire and loss, then woke to voices. Mabel and Richie had come to spend time together privately, confirming Leonard's suspicion. Richie told Mabel that Francis believed someone in the Boyle organization was betraying them to rival group La Fontaine. Richie resented Francis because Roy trusted Francis more than his own son. He viewed Francis as an outsider who'd once saved Roy's life, not real family. Leonard accidentally made a noise. He quickly pretended to be asleep while Mabel guided Richie out. Days later, Richie and Francis returned for another envelope containing a letter and cassette tape. That evening, they rushed back in panic. Richie had been shot in the stomach. Francis carried him to the back room and demanded Leonard apply pressure to the wound. He blamed Richie for hesitating during their attack and warned that people would come hunting for the briefcase. Francis called Roy, explaining they'd been attacked by La Fontaine and were hiding at Leonard's shop. Roy said he'd come retrieve them. When Richie asked to go home, Francis refused. Roy had ordered them to wait. Seeing Richie losing blood, Francis ordered Leonard to sew the gunshot wound. Leonard hesitated, saying he wasn't a doctor, but drawing on limited past experience, he agreed. The procedure was excruciating. Richie lost consciousness as Leonard stitched without anesthesia, but Leonard managed to stop the bleeding. Francis sealed the tape in the suitcase and asked Leonard to watch Richie while he stepped out. Leonard refused, insisting he didn't want involvement in their violent affairs. Francis said he was already involved and the shop was the only safe place available. He explained the tape contained illegal wiretap recordings. Someone close to the family was working with the FBI. They'd planned to listen elsewhere but were ambushed, resulting in Richie's injury. Francis needed to find a cassette player and identify the traitor. He warned Leonard to keep the tape safe and get rid of police if they came. After Francis left, Leonard noticed blood on a suit and began replacing the stained fabric. Richie regained consciousness and thanked Leonard for saving him. When Richie asked about Francis, Leonard explained he'd gone to find a cassette player and believed the betrayer might be within the family. Leonard told Richie that Roy was a good man, his first customer when the shop opened. Richie remembered that day and how Roy had come home excited about a tailor from London. Roy cared about appearance and had taught Richie to tie a tie at age 4. Leonard asked if Richie suspected anyone. When Richie said no, Leonard pressed him, suggesting the traitor was likely someone very close to the family. Then Leonard calmly stated he was the one who'd passed information to their enemies.
I'm the rat.
And helped the FBI plan a bug. Richie laughed, assuming it was a joke. Leonard laughed too and continued stitching. Richie dismissed it. Why would a simple tailor be involved in mafia betrayals? Leonard corrected him. He wasn't a tailor, but a cutter. The roles were very different. Anyone could call themselves a tailor with thread and needle, but becoming a cutter required years of study and discipline at an elite fashion house on Savile Row. Richie asked why he'd moved to Chicago. Leonard explained that after the war, London men couldn't afford quality clothing anymore and blue jeans began spreading. What he made was timeless, not built on trends. Leonard then mentioned hoping Richie's cousin was all right. Richie clarified that Francis wasn't family, just a stranger his father had taken in. Leonard suggested Francis's eagerness to uncover a traitor might indicate Francis himself was the betrayer. He told Richie not to fear Francis's betrayal, speaking with the confidence of someone enjoying shaping the conversation. When Francis returned, Leonard quietly told him that Richie suspected him and had looked in the suitcase. Leonard was deliberately manipulating both men, setting them against each other. Influenced by Leonard's words, Richie questioned why Francis was unharmed during the ambush while he'd been shot. Francis said he'd been fortunate. Richie demanded to know where he'd been. Francis explained he'd found a tape player and planned to take the cassette there. Richie insisted on going along, but Francis said he wasn't in shape for it. Francis insisted they play the tape immediately, but Richie said they should wait for Roy. The argument escalated into physical struggle. They discovered the suitcase was empty. Richie drew his gun, demanding to know where the tape was. Francis insisted he was loyal to Roy. Richie admitted hating Francis since day one. Francis fired back that he was the one standing beside Roy, cleaning up messes while Richie made them. During the argument, Francis shot Richie in the neck, killing him instantly. He told Richie he died because he was weak, then shot him again. Leonard froze. Francis demanded the tape's location, but Leonard claimed ignorance. Francis searched frantically, but found nothing. Roy arrived with his men. Francis nervously asked Leonard to help hide Richie's body and delay Roy so he could clean the blood. Leonard greeted Roy, who thanked him for standing by the family. By the time Roy reached the back, the blood was gone and Francis had time to invent a story. Roy asked where Richie was. Francis claimed Richie had taken the tape and left to find him. Roy demanded to know why Francis hadn't followed. Francis explained Richie wouldn't listen and had told him to wait. Roy made calls but couldn't find Richie. He ordered Francis to search while he stayed in case Richie returned or someone called with information. Francis hesitated, terrified Roy might discover the body, but eventually left. While waiting, Roy spoke with Leonard, asking about his training. Roy's eyes landed on a suit. He asked why Leonard had moved to Chicago. Leonard said because of blue jeans. Roy laughed at the response. Roy examined Leonard's shears and showed him his gun, his tool. He compared those killed to fabric scraps discarded when making a suit, necessary to shape the neighborhood he was building. Roy explained that the outfit was the world's largest criminal organization with operations across Europe and the United States. They'd offered the Boyle family an alliance because the Boyles were willing to fight LaFontaine. The outfit had provided the FBI wiretap recording to help identify the traitor. Leonard appeared confused, asking why Roy was sharing such sensitive information since he'd never discussed mafia matters before. Roy revealed he'd realized Richie never left the shop. His coat was still hanging inside, and Roy knew his son wouldn't go out in winter without it. He called over one of his men who pointed a gun at Leonard, demanding the truth. Before Leonard could respond, Francis entered holding Mabel at gunpoint. Roy demanded Leonard tell the truth. Fearing for Mabel, Leonard quickly invented a story. Richie felt ashamed because Francis had killed several rival men while he hadn't, so he'd left to confront LaFontaine's people alone to prove himself. Francis claimed Richie had stopped at Mabel's apartment because she was his girlfriend. Roy questioned Mabel about Richie's location, but she said she didn't know. Francis stated he'd noticed a blood stain on Mabel's carpet, suggesting Richie had been injured there. Mabel called it a lie. Roy asked who she was and realized he'd known her late father. Growing impatient, Roy began pressuring Mabel aggressively. Francis claimed she might be the rat since she was romantically involved with Richie. Leonard said he'd known Mabel for years and was certain she wasn't betraying them. Francis started beating Mabel while questioning her. Leonard physically intervened, trying to pull Francis away. Roy and Francis ignored his protest and dragged Mabel into another room. Leonard felt sick and decided to step out for air. Francis stopped him at the door. Roy said no one was leaving until they found Richie. Leonard said he was tired and needed to leave. He told Roy he understood what it felt like to search for someone and feel the ground slipping away. He admitted he hadn't come to Chicago because of blue jeans. He once had a wife and daughter who died in a fire. Because of that loss, he now thought of Mabel as his own child and couldn't watch her be destroyed. The phone rang. Leonard answered, then told Roy it was Richie, claiming he was hiding from LaFontaine at a specific street location. Roy decided to retrieve him with his men. Francis stayed behind to watch Leonard and Mabel in case they were lying. Roy agreed and left. After Roy departed, Leonard revealed the truth. He'd deliberately given a false address, so LaFontaine's men would ambush Roy and his crew. Leonard then revealed Mabel was the traitor. After becoming involved with Richie, she'd gained access to private Boyle family information and passed it to LaFontaine in exchange for money. Knowing the Boyles would eventually discover her actions, she'd turned to the FBI for protection, working with them to arrange wiretaps and plan the family's arrest. Leonard had known about Mabel's actions all along and chose not to interfere, understanding her motivation was money and her desire to travel. Francis was stunned. When he demanded to know if she'd taken the tape, Leonard explained he'd hidden it to shield Mabel from danger. Leonard proposed that Mabel call LaFontaine and tell them Francis's location so they'd attack him. Francis resisted, saying he wouldn't betray Roy. Leonard said it was either that or Roy would discover Richie was dead and kill them all. Cornered, Francis finally gave Mabel permission to call. Mabel made a deal to exchange the tape for cash. Before the exchange, Francis instructed Leonard and Mabel to use a signal once LaFontaine handed over the money, allowing Francis to leave the back room and kill LaFontaine. After LaFontaine arrived and paid Mabel, Leonard and Mabel betrayed Francis by informing LaFontaine of his location. Francis jumped out pointing his gun, but Leonard told LaFontaine he'd emptied it earlier. Francis was shot multiple times by LaFontaine's men and left to die. Once LaFontaine departed, Leonard told Mabel the full truth. He'd personally recorded the tape and placed it in the mailbox under the outfit's name to manipulate the Boyle family. The tape given to LaFontaine was fake, containing only Leonard's voice. Leonard had been recording that night's events so Mabel could hand it to the FBI, allowing law enforcement to dismantle both the Boyle family and LaFontaine group. Leonard encouraged Mabel to leave Chicago and travel using the money she'd received. She asked him to come, but he refused, saying she shouldn't waste her youth caring for an old man. Mabel said goodbye and left. That night, Leonard packed his belongings and deliberately set his shop on fire to erase evidence. Unexpectedly, Francis, still alive, regained consciousness and fired at Leonard, wounding his arm. Francis realized his gun was empty and took out a knife. Leonard explained his true past. He was once a violent man like Francis. He rolled up his sleeve, showing tattooed arms. One day his former boss asked him to do something he wasn't comfortable with, so he left and relocated to London. There he met his wife, fell in love, and settled down. His old associates tracked him down and murdered his wife and daughter by setting their home on fire. Broken, he'd moved to Chicago to start over. But on his first day opening the shop, fate led him to the Boyle family. Francis tried to stab him, but Leonard moved aside and stabbed Francis in the neck with his shears. Francis died instantly. Leonard walked away from his burning shop, leaving Chicago behind to begin a new life somewhere else. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.